You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is January 12th, 2023, and welcome to the Psychedelics and Cannabis educational news. Your cannabis and psychedelic news source found here at paceradio.net, plus at cbgtv.com, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and on the Boxcast app found on all of the streaming things that go with your TV, Roku, Fire Stick, all that jazz. Morning, Glenn.
Good morning, Cindy. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm kind of running behind. I mean, I still got wet hair from grabbing a shower, but beyond running behind a few minutes, I'm doing absolutely fantastic. How are you?
I'm great. I'm very hot. I'm sweating this morning already.
Yeah. Coming to us here in cold Canada. Glenn is sitting down there in Costa Rica, sweating his behind off, and yeah. I for one am just a little bit jealous today. It is minus 15 before the wind chill here in Windsor, Nova Scotia. Yeah, it's cold. It's cold. And we've been having like zeros. So, and then all of a sudden, boom.
It's 9 o'clock in the morning here, and it's 25 something degrees.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah. I'm Canadian, so I'm not used to this.
No, you're sitting down there sweating. Yeah, crazy. Well, we've got 8 stories, and so we might as well just jump right into it, hey? Sure. Story number 1. We're heading over to CTV News. As the under the table market grows, patients urge Ottawa to regulate magic mushrooms.
Thomas Hartle became one of the first Canadians to receive a federal exemption to treat symptoms of his stage 4 colon cancer with magic mushrooms just a few years ago, and he was celebrated for it. Not long after the landmark decision, Hartle says the legal avenues to access the drug have been shut off, even as an illegal market blooms. The only places where I really run into problems is with a Minister of Health himself and with the Health Canada being resistant to moving forward with opening the avenues of this, he said in an interview.
The psychoactive compound produced by the mushrooms, called psilocybin, is not legal in Canada, but early clinical trials are underway to test its effectiveness in treating mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression. Listed under the Schedule 3 of Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, the drug, mushrooms, medicine, can only be obtained legally via an exemption from the federal minister as part of a clinical trial or through a special access program, SAP, that allows physicians to request it for patients suffering from serious or life-threatening conditions.
But in some cities, including Vancouver, Toronto, and Ottawa, psilocybin can be easily found at a growing number of brick and mortar shops openly selling magic mushrooms. And a web search for such products shows that they are readily available for delivery to Canadian doorsteps. In 2020, Hartle was among a handful of patients, many of whom were suffering from terminal illness, granted the exemption to use psilocybin by former Health Minister Patty Hajdu.
The exemptions under Canada's drug law did not allow the patients to buy or legally receive psilocybin, but allowed their medical practitioners to use it for treatment without participating in a crime. Hartle said the psilocybin made him more comfortable with his end-of-life anxiety, but his exemption expired after a year, and he is still waiting on an answer about getting another one. Now, I remember reporting on the SAP program when it first came into play, and we were also super duper excited because, it was supposed to be easier. It was supposed to cut down on time. It was supposed to do all of these wonderful things for not just psilocybin, but for other natural remedies that, like iboga is on the list, ibogaine, 5-MeO-DMT is on the list, which means like other DMT is on the list, and ayahuasca. And, it's going to be like this really quick turnaround. You're going to know within 30 days.
Yeah.
And he's been waiting since after his first year, and his first year was quite a while ago, and he's still waiting.
The government never does anything in a short time.
No. So the SAP program ended up to be quite the lie. And we should have kept the old way. I mean, and we learned that the hard way, going from the old the old medical system to the new medical system with cannabis too. So it's really upsetting to see.
Yeah, and he admits that nothing is stopping him from buying the illegal mushrooms that are available online or at brick and mortar stores. But he wants to discourage people from going into these illegal markets and get treatment from potentially questionable sources and people, he said. I would like this therapy to be medicalized so that it's a treatment, so that your doctor can just give it to you, give you a referral to a professional who is qualified and experienced and who has access to a safe supply.
Health Canada said in a statement that early clinical trials examining psilocybin have shown promising results, but further research is still needed, and the best way for patients to access psilocybin is through participation in a clinical trial. But these clinical trials, I mean, the one that I was supposed to be involved in and was accepted to, and I was very lucky, but I ended up going for Iboga instead. They accepted 20 people. Of the hundreds of thousands that need this treatment, they accepted 20 people.
Wow.
So, if these trials were accepting thousands of people, that would be wonderful. But 20 people, I mean, like it's virtually impossible. The only reason why I got accepted in the first place is because I come with the approval of a psychiatrist, and that gets the people doing these things excited. So they want me to come in because my psychiatrist supports me. But it's crazy. You're
one of the lucky few.
I am, and I won't give up my psychiatrist for anything. She keeps cutting down my time. She goes, because Iboga and DMT are helping. You don't need me as much. It's like, no, I have your support. I need you. So, but I mean, I'm very, very lucky to have her because she helps me be able to do these things.
When I first went to get my medical exemption for cannabis, my doctor told me it was immoral.
Yeah. What would he say about if you went and asked for magic mushrooms?
Yeah, I don't know. He said abortion and cannabis are immoral.
Yeah, well, he needs to come into this year and get that reefer madness out of his head, because that's what's playing in his head, is that movie constantly berating him. And I understand it from an older generation too. But it's time for them to open their ears and their hearts and their minds and listen, at least.
Mm-hmm.
At least. Though Health Canada says dozens of ministerial exemptions were granted last year, more than 100 requests are still outstanding, including Hartle's.
It kind of amazes me that his is still waiting, because he was one of the first, or he was the first one.
Yep.
It's amazing that these patients can very easily go to storefronts and buy these mushrooms, but are being barred from doing it safely with their doctor. From a registered medical source, said Spencer Hawkswell, a CEO of TheraSil, a non-profit organization. TheraSil? Okay.
TheraSil.
That offers training to healthcare practitioners and is working with patients to obtain psilocybin and combat the government's drug policy. The group helped Hartle and others get their exemptions and is leading a legal challenge to fight the status of psilocybin in court.
Federal government never justified why it departed from the original decision to grant the exception, Hawkswell said. Instead, it is currently requiring doctors to apply through a special access program, they call it SAP, to use psilocybin. Hawkswell said that that has created challenges because doctors are unwilling to apply or participate without first being trained. And outside of a clinical trial, experience treating patients with psilocybin was previously only available through an exemption. And most people that are trained are considered to be shamanic healers. They don't teach anything about cannabis or psilocybin or any of these other medicines in what we have in our modernized schools. There is no cannabis education. There's no psilocybin education. They don't talk about what goes on in Africa or Peru with other medications, and what's native to North America, which is the peyote. They don't talk about these things in school. It's the shamanic self-taught healers or shamanic healers that are taught by their elders that know how to give the psilocybin. What I
Yep.
think needs to be done is they need to be able to license the people that are the shamanic healers in order to work with the psychologists and the psychiatrists out there.
That's one of the hard hurdles to jump over, because I find that people with degrees don't like working with people that don't have degrees. They kind of think they're below them.
Yeah, and again, going back to my psychiatrist, I'm extremely lucky. She said, because she said, if you would get
Yeah.
trained to deal with the mushroom side of it, Cindy, she goes, we would work so well together. And it's just, that made my heart, you know,
Yep.
just get so happy, because, you know, she's she's starting to realize that she is one of the leading psychiatrists in Canada because of her thought. Like, I mean, one of her idols is Gabor Maté. And I told her, I said, you are there with him. You just don't know it yet. And I said, but you will soon see it. Right. And it's true, because she's really excited for all this stuff.
She's the rarity, though, and that's the problem right now.
Yeah, that's why people like her have to be like Gabor, and they have to stand up and say what they're believing in and what they see. And she's almost
Yep.
to that point, and I'm so excited for her to reach that point, right?
This has
Yeah.
the department and current health minister, Jean-Yves Duclos, putting the cart before the horse, he said. You can almost think about like the government granting patients access to chemotherapy by making medical school and the training around chemotherapy illegal, Hawkswell said. We would have to underground chemotherapy treatments, and that's what's happening today in Canada. Yes.
He's comparing mushrooms to chemotherapy. Well, we have a time limit, so I'm going to not comment on that. Demand for training on how to
I knew
use
you'd have something
psilocybin. Demand for training on how to use psilocybin-assisted therapy, psychotherapy, has been absolutely unbelievable, he added. But he doesn't blame the majority of doctors who are reluctant. They're putting an awful lot on the line in terms of their reputation and credibility for this treatment, because, you know, as of now, Health Canada does not recognize psilocybin in a treatment as a treatment for anything. And again, time restrictions, so I've got to shut up. Shh, Cindy. Shh.
In the absence of federal regulation, some provinces are moving ahead with their own regulation regimes for psilocybin. In December, Quebec became the first province to announce it would provide health coverage for the cost of psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy. And this month, regulations for psychedelics, including psilocybin, MDMA, and LSD, will come into force in Alberta that are intended to see these drugs administered by licensed practitioners.
But there is no visible effort at the federal or provincial level to take action against the open and legal sale of magic mushrooms. Justice Minister David Lamante's office referred questions about psilocybin to Health Canada, and Public Safety Minister Macro Mencinio's office did not respond to questions about whether law enforcement should respond to stores that are opening illegally.
Hawkswell said the only way to upend a growing illegal market is to create a safe, regulated market. We should not have unregulated psilocybin. That's what we have right now. It's being sold and consumed widely in Canada, he said. We need to have regulations around this.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh boy, man, if we had more time, I would be able to like say all kinds of things about that, but I would get going and you would get going, and the next thing you know, we wouldn't have a second story because we take up the whole hour.
Yeah,
it's true. It's true. That's why we do this well, is because we like to talk about it. But heading on to the second story, so I can get that out of my brain and not come back and take up the whole hour. We're heading over to the Calgary Herald. Actually, psychedelic therapy stifled by new Alberta regulations, clinic operators say.
regulations the province insists are meant to put Alberta at the forefront of psychedelic therapy are actually restricting access to such treatment, some clinic operators say. Last October, government unveiled first in Canada regulation covering the growing field use of substances such as ketamine and psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, to create conditions like depression and post-traumatic stress disorder.
The government says
Treat, say create.
the government says there's rules that strengthen safety in a still fledgling field, employing drugs that can be misused by operators of some therapy sites that have been offering the treatment say the regulations requirement that a psychiatrist be part of a clinic's team dramatically limits access to the treatment. Less than 5% of psychiatrists here are willing to be involved in this therapy, says David Harder, who operates the ATMA Journey Center in Calgary.
And our concern to make these treatments accessible, because a lot of people can't afford psychiatric supervised treatment. Wait months. Therapy previously performed by some clinics would be halted or reduced by the regulation, even though the employment of illegal drugs like psilocybin and MDMA are governed by Health Canada, which allows some exemptions for their medical use under a so-called special access program, he said.
Harder fears the provincial rules, which take effect this month, will make it harder for Albertans to take advantage of what he sees is the federal government's intention to liberalize the availability of psychedelics. We believe that work being done in trials and Health Canada's indications they want to move this to a drug identifications number, which would be amazing, and make it available to prescription could be negated, he said.
And he points to the state of Oregon's move to legalize the use of psilocybin in therapy and requires the licensing of trained non-psychiatrist facilitators as a better path for Alberta. Harder said it's ironic that Alberta's government is placing more barriers to the treatment, just as psychedelics potential is making brains more flexible and amenable to therapy is becoming increasingly known.
Yeah. They see it coming, but are making a concentrated effort to shut it down, says Harder, adding physicians who now prescribe antidepressants should be able to do the same with psychedelics. I 100% agree. Another clinic operator agreed that regulations effectively make it more difficult to use ketamine for therapy. They've reclassified ketamine. They've reduced access by lumping ketamine in with these other restricted drugs, said Jim Parker, CEO of Calgary's Bloom Psychedelic Therapy and Research Center.
Rules will lead patients to go to other provinces for treatment. Parker said the regulations come with a possible conflict of interest due to the involvement of Dr. Robert Tangway in their development. Tangway is a psychiatrist with a long history in developing treatments for mental health, pain control, and addictions, is chief medical officer and vice president of business development with the Newly Institute, which includes psychedelic in its treatment programs.
Person who owns a clinic should not be involved in creating regulations for it, Parker said. It's vital to note the new regulations don't require a psychiatrist to be present at therapy sessions, but that service providers appoint a medical director who is a psychiatrist to oversee all clinically related aspects of the service, said Colin Atkinson, spokesman for mental health and addiction.
Monitoring treatment and care patients in an altered state of consciousness can be provided by authorized, regulated members and individuals approved by the medical director. Because the science of psychedelics in therapy is still emerging, clinics have psychiatrists as a medical directors enhances safety, he said.
And while he didn't mention Tangway by name, he says the regulations were developed through consultations with a wide range of medical experts, academics, and industry players, as well as regulatory colleges. Their knowledge and diverse perspectives have helped shape the regulation and standards to protect Albertans while ensuring access to promising treatments, he said.
And Tangay didn't respond to a request for comment Monday, but last October dismissed conflict of interest accusations, saying he disclosed any potential issues to government or with government officials. Charlene Sleeman, Health Canada spokeswoman, said Alberta regulatory changes introduce additional safeguards and oversight for the delivery of psychedelic health services in their province.
At this time, there are no authorized therapeutic products containing psychedelics other than ketamine in Canada or elsewhere. While psychedelics like psilocybin and MDMA have shown promise in clinical trials, more research is required, she added. Even so, She said that up until mid-October last year, Health Canada granted healthcare practitioners 32 SAP exemptions for use of psilocybin in treatment and another 81 authorizations for patients under subsection 56.1 requests. But they still didn't get back to the first guy that they allowed, which we learned in the previous story.
That's the way our government seems to work.
It is. They're going backwards. We are now heading over to the CBC. I love that we've got a lot of mainstream people reporting on this stuff. British Columbians have mixed opinions on allowing cannabis consumption space when they have the greatest cannabis consumption space, two of them side by side.
Wow. BC surveyed the public on potentially approving cannabis spaces such as lounges or cafes. British Columbia has released the results of a public engagement on the possible approval of cannabis consumption spaces such as lounges, cafes, special events, other businesses where cannabis products are available for sale.
The report produced by the Minister of Public Safety to inform a decision on consumption spaces shows most respondents who use cannabis like the idea, while there's opposition from those who don't consume the medicine. It says there may be at least 750,000 people in BC interested in visiting a cannabis consumption space based on the engagement launched last spring and a 2021 survey that estimated 1.4 million residents used the medicine in the previous year.
But the report shows responses from public health and safety stakeholders that express concerns that both cannabis and alcohol might be purchased and consumed at the same locations, which could raise the risk of impaired driving. The survey respondents were informed that outdoor smoking and vaping could not be permitted in the potential cannabis consumption spaces, but some may not have considered that restriction when submitting their feedback, it adds.
Yeah, the report released Tuesday shows 61% of the 730 people randomly selected for a telephone, 730 people out of 1.4 million, for a telephone survey were open to cannabis consumption spaces with support of from 48% of respondents who indicate they do not consume the medicine. Of more than 15,000 people who participated in an online survey, the report says 34% felt the same, with 94% of the people who use cannabis supporting the spaces and 91% of the people who don't use the medicine opposing them.
However, the report says that the results from the online survey don't necessarily represent the opinions of the broader BC population because of the potential of self-selection bias associated with choosing to take part. Those surveyed by telephone indicated similar levels of support and opposition to alcohol and cannabis being sold at the same locations at just over 40%, while 64% of online respondents opposed such an arrangement.
The most common reason for opposing the co-location of cannabis and alcohol was the challenge it would present for business owners and customers in assessing intoxication and preventing overconsumption, the report said. Meanwhile, it says most organizations affiliated with the cannabis industry support co-location, with some raising arguments around individual choice and questioning the feasibility of establishing separate cannabis consumption spaces while competing with businesses that serve alcohol.
Yeah. In general, it says those who approved of cannabis consumption spaces tended to see them as a way to create jobs, support local businesses, reduce stigma associated with the use, and provide a place for people to socialize. The surveys revealed some demographic differences with greater support for cannabis consumption spaces among men, younger people, Indigenous respondents, and those who identify as visible minority, the report notes. So basically everybody but white people. That's what it's saying here.
The BC government has not yet, or anybody who presents as a white person, because you know, there's a lot of us that are mixed race that present as Caucasian, but we're not fully, right? The BC government has not yet made a decision about cannabis consumption spaces, what types of spaces might be allowed, or how they may be regulated. A discussion paper released by the Ministry of Public Safety last spring outlined 5 proposed principles to guide the approach of consumption spaces, including prioritizing public safety, respecting local control over land use decisions, and encouraging consumers to transition to the regulated rather than the illegal market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got caught up in that story and lost myself, but that's okay. I came back now. Oh, that happens once in a while. I'm clicking.
It was an interesting story.
It was an interesting story. It had me thinking for a moment, and that's why I didn't come back right away. I apologize for that. But heading off to the next story, we are heading over to MJ Biz Daily. And this is about something that has affected more than just the cannabis community down there. High winds and flooding shutter cannabis operations across California, and we see it in the price of lettuce the last few weeks as well.
Yep. The historic storms pummeling California have caused widespread fallout for cannabis operators across the state and are disrupting operations and possibly supplies. As days of high winds and catastrophic rains batter the coast, some cannabis companies have temporarily closed operations and shored up their facilities in a desperate attempt to lessen the damage.
Several businesses told MJ Biz Daily their operations have been flooded, causing untold economic setbacks. Others have reported product losses and heavy rains damaged crops. Widespread power outages have also halted production lines and left plants vulnerable to mold and other contaminants.
Road closures and dangerous conditions have prevented several operators from even accessing their operations. This storm system, which is expected to dissipate by Tuesday afternoon, is the latest climate disaster in California.
In late September, a heat wave wreaked havoc on the state's cannabis industry, coming on the heels of another challenging wildfire season. Washed out roads are preventing workers from accessing cultivation facilities, which could lead to lost sales and delays in production, including packaging and trimming of flower.
That in turn could cause cannabis supply chain disruptions and leave some retail shelves empty. The storm, which started on Sunday, has forced tens of thousands to evacuate and at least 15 people statewide. More than 34 million are under a flood watch.
Strong winds have also toppled trees and knocked out power to multiple locations. In Central California, parts of Ventura and Santa Barbara counties have received more than 16 inches of rain.
Wow.
Holy balls.
Wow.
As of Tuesday morning, the New York Times reported with more rain forecast over the next several days. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and they got hit really hard yesterday, Graham, for our president of Santa Barbara-based cannabis company, Glass House Brands, said about Monday's storm. The company closed both its cultivation operations in Carpinteria on early Monday to ensure workers could get home to their families and wouldn't get trapped on the wrong side of a road closure, Farrar said.
Wow. More impact than just rain and wind. The rain hit 5 years after January 9, 2018 storm that caused mudslides in the hills above Santa Barbara, killing 23 and injuring many, many more. This time, streets in downtown Santa Barbara are flooded again with cars underwater. It's like a monsoon, Farrar said.
Yep. Despite the rivers raging right now, Glass House facilities aren't in any low-lying areas, so Farrar isn't currently worried about property damage from flooding. The high winds did break a few panes of glass, he said, but his workers shored up the facilities with sandbags and locked down the buildings before the storm hit. Nice. Aside
from the immediate impacts of the rain and wind, Farrar pointed out that cloudy weather the past several weeks have been the lowest levels he can remember in years. With the low light and high humidity from the storms, he's worried about mold and contaminated and boitis contaminating his crops.
So managing the climate through these events takes at least as much focus as actually securing the facilities for it, Farrar added. Glass House operates as an indoor sun-grown facility and doesn't use much supplemental lighting aside from photoperiod lights. Yeah.
Farrar pointed out that his climate control systems are automated, but the cultivation facilities still need on-site workers. If a road closes to the north, we'll send someone from the south. If it's the other direction, we'll do vice versa, he said.
Yeah, we'll definitely have people over there. The one silver lining, according to Farrar, California really needs rain. The power's out. Aidan Raffi hasn't been able to communicate from San Francisco to his Monterey County company's manufacturing facility for more than a week because of widespread road and highway closures.
The CEO of Euphoric Life, Raffi, has been monitoring potential water breaches late into the night with security cameras. He thought the company had escaped operational and product damage after sandbagging all the doorways and entryways.
But a few minutes after speaking with MJ Biz Daily late Tuesday morning, he called back to report that the power went out during a butane extraction run in the Hollister facility, which was starting to take in water from ground swells. Meanwhile, roughly 2,800 pounds of fresh frozen biomass is stored in the company's freezers.
Without power, if the material thaws out, it will be ruined, he said. It's close to $140,000 batch of material. That's going to be a pretty difficult blow for us. By late Tuesday afternoon, the power was restored and the biomass was saved.
Good. Because of the federal ban on cannabis, Euphoric Life's products can't be insured. Of course they can't. Euphoric learned that lesson the hard way a few years ago after a rainstorm washed away about 10,000 worth of product after water seeped into the facility. There's no recourse, he said.
Yeah, nearly 225,000 residences and businesses had no electricity Tuesday, according to poweroutage.us. And more than a quarter of the outages were in Santa Clara County, the heart of the Silicon Valley. Several prolific cannabis growing counties experienced widespread power outage, including Monterey, Santa Cruz, and Mendocino.
On Tuesday, the power had been out for a couple of days in Salinas, where Jesus Barula lives and works. CEO of cannabis grower and packager Postil said most of his workers haven't been able to access the farm because of flooded roads. Unfortunately, Barolo said, one of the workers has a lifted pickup and that allows him to traverse the mud. Nice.
Good. But basically, all of our trimming, drying, packaging, production, we employ over 100 people. Those folks have not been able to come for the last 2 days, he said. That disruption to the production means the brand that rely on his company and have pending orders could likely run out of product.
And they're going to encounter stockouts because any delay in our production ends up affecting this whole supply chain, Barola added. In Mendocino County, high winds could jeopardize hoop houses utilized by several small farmers in the region, and power outage could ruin curing and storage processes, according to Michael Katz, who's the executive director of Mendocino Cannabis Alliance.
He said at least one large local manufacturer experienced significant flooding that blocked access to the facility. With the inability to write off normal business expenses, the damage caused by these storms could be very hard for some folks to address, Katz said.
Christian Novadell, the director of Mendocino County's cannabis department, said warning sent to growers who were operating adjacent to burn scars inflicted by massive wildfires a few years ago. Those burn scars tended to turn into mudslides when they're hit with heavy rain such as this, she added.
But ultimately, a lot of the growers in the Emerald Triangle are self-sufficient and can manage without electricity. Most of the Royal homesteaders either have alternative energy sources or have figured out how to use very limited amounts of power.
And it appears Napa and nearby Lake County, where several cannabis cultivators have operations, had been spared from widespread damages as of mid-morning Tuesday. Eric Sklar, who sounded relieved since his Napa Valley fume office's operational facilities and cannabis farm in Lake County had sustained no damages as of press time.
On Monday morning, he said the Napa River is nearby St. Helena, nearly crusted over 17 feet, which would have triggered flooding. It never got there. It stopped a foot short, said Sklar, who founded the Napa Valley fume cannabis business. Sonoma is having it a lot harder.
Natalie Delap, executive director of the Humboldt County Growers Association, said on Monday afternoon that some growers were experiencing wind damages stemming from some low-tech infrastructure, plastic getting ripped off hoop houses, for example, and roadways were closed because of downed trees. It is not a catastrophic as the news makes it sound, he added.
Many of our people live off the grid, so the loss of power is negligible. We don't have any significant landslides or flooding. Things could change, but right now we're doing okay. Well, that's really good to hear. But I mean, they've lost a lot of cannabis, it sounds, and they have the potential of losing more.
It sounds like with no insurance, you could wipe out some people.
Yeah, they got to do something on a federal level, get this legalized on a federal level. But with that, it is medication time and time for us to go have a joint session. Ha, 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 ha. You're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Boxcast, Roku TV, or at paceradio.net.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Let's share PACE everywhere. That way it can help create peace. People everywhere advocating cannabis education.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Did you know that the Pace Radio Network isn't just a radio network? That's right, because most, but not all of our programming is now done via video and is then podcasted at paceradio.net. So if you want to watch, yes, watch our programming, you'll find us on the Pace Radio Network's Facebook page, plus the show's own page, and you'll find us live on the network's YouTube channel. And don't forget, you can find it all, video and audio, at paceradio.net.
Pace Radio is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
CBG TV broadcasting to a worldwide audience. Find us at cbgtv.com.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
And we are back from our medication session, and we are live. Yes, we are live here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Boxcast, and at paceradio.net. And we might as well head right off, and I didn't do any clicking during the break. I smoked my joint. I said I was going to have a joint session, and I did. But we are heading to our first story after the break now, coming to us from Medical Express. And first-in-kind psychedelic trials to treat opiate and methamphetamine use disorders, and that really makes me excited.
3 million people in the United States have had opioid use disorder, and another 1.5 million people have dealt with methamphetamine misuse within the last year alone. But 2 clinical trials out of UV Transdisciplinary Center for Research in Psychoactive Substances, housed within the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Pharmacy, aim to address these pressing issues with a promising psychoactive agent, psilocybin.
The medicine has shown an encouraging result for patients with depression and with tobacco and alcohol misuse. Now, a UW-Madison research team is investigating the use of psilocybin to aid in decreasing opiate and methamphetamine misuse. The team includes Pat Houston, who's a professor at the school's pharmacy practice and translational research division, and founding director of the TCRPS, as well as Randall Brown and Christopher Nicholas, faculty at the UW School of Medicine and Public Health.
The pair of clinical trials represent groundbreaking firsts in their use of psilocybin and their flexible design. We already have evidence that psilocybin can do some remarkable things to improve a patient's ability to gain and process important insights about their lives and experiences, said Hudson, who's the co-investigator on both studies. We're excited to see that it can do along the same lines for patients struggling with substance abuse, many of whom have overlapping mental health conditions.
Absolutely. Both trials are open label, single arm trials, meaning there is no control group or placebo. The goals of the trials are to test for safety and feasibility. Once established, the groundwork will allow for future studies about the treatment's effectiveness. Every participant in these trials will undergo a psychological screening and at least 6 hours of preparatory counseling. Participants will then receive at least one 25 milligram dose of psilocybin and be observed for 8 hours by 2 therapists in the School of Pharmacy's dedicated clinical research facility, an unparalleled space that resembles a living room, decked out with the comforts of home, plus monitoring technology to ensure study efficiency. So I just want to go back up here for just 5 seconds and talk about the 25 milligram dose. I know a lot of people that have, ate a mushroom or 2 or 20 or over their time. They are looking at there and they're going 25 milligrams of a gram of mushrooms. No, it is 25 milligrams of psilocybin. So they have extracted the psilocybin and they're giving you 25 milligrams of pure psilocybin, which is actually equivalent to 5 grams of dried product. Just, I wanted people to know. 5 grams. Yeah, you get about 5 milligrams of psilocybin out of.
Wow. After monitoring, participants will spend the night in the clinical research unit at UW Hospital, followed by an integration or debriefing session with a psychologist before they're discharged. To be optimally therapeutic, psychedelic drugs need to be integrated with an adequate preparation and screening for patients to confirm that they are appropriate to receive these medications, and they are attended by a trained therapist, and that they have 1 or more integration sessions afterward, so they can have some guided interpretation of their experience, said Hudson. We also recognize the need to provide subsequent support to patients to reinforce desired behavioral and lifestyle changes that can be a challenge in this patient population.
4 weeks after the first dose, participants will have the option to take a second dose of either 25 or 50 milligrams based on whether they received an adequate psychedelic experience the first time. A component that's remarkably different than other psilocybin studies is this option of increasing the dose for both the opioid and the methamphetamine studies, said Houston. That's uncommon and will test the idea of whether there's a dose response to outcomes from psychedelics.
Participants in drug trials often face stringent eligibility criteria, and the UW-Madison team is rethinking historic exclusionary conditions in favor of including persons more representative of those abusing opioids or methamphetamines. If we're going to recruit a sample of patients that's more helpful to clinical practice in terms of how generalizable it is, we need to do careful thinking about this balance of eligibility and what issues are likely to affect safety, says Brown.
Participants' final follow-up visit is 2 months after the last dose, at which time the patient's psychedelic experiences and any changes in substance use will be evaluated. Historically, clinical trials addressing methamphetamine use disorder see many participants drop out, compromising the results. Clinical trials are quite rigorous and time-consuming, so these 2 studies are designed to be as flexible as possible.
The team is recruiting individuals that are actively using methamphetamine, another aspect of the study ground. Typically, substance misuse trials have detoxed and been stabilized. Studying their active users will enable the researchers to take a closer look at how addiction and psilocybin impact the brain through MRI scans. Scans will be taken before and after each psilocybin dose to acquire early data on how networks in the brain associated with addiction, mental health, and well-being may change across the course of the study. We'll hopefully be able to correlate these changes in various outcome measures, whether it's mood, addiction-related constructs, well-being, or emotional measures, says Nicholas, the principal investigator of the methamphetamine study.
The clinical trial exploring psilocybin for opiate use disorder, led by Brown, also marks new territory. The opiate use disorder study is really the first of its kind, said Brown. There hasn't been any study of psilocybin in the setting of opiate use disorder.
Studying those who misuse opioids requires some additional consideration for safety because of risk associated with overdose and mortality that goes along with fentanyl or similar drugs. Brown says preventing withdrawal symptoms with bupropion can help individuals avoid using far riskier street drugs. The opioid use disorder study got underway in 2021 and the methamphetamine use disorder study is beginning recruitment. Although both studies are in the early stages, the research team expects that they will add to the scientific and cultural understanding of psilocybin. One of the myths of the team hopes to dispel is that treatment with psilocybin is simply trading one drug for another.
Yeah, it's absolutely not true. There's no evidence that psilocybin and LSD are addictive agents, says Houston. And despite encouraging findings across a range of conditions, the clinical environment, not just psychedelics themselves, is key to patient success. They're not a quick fix, says Nichols. They have the potential to be very helpful for a number of mental health and substance use disorders, but it's a full package treatment that involves counseling before and after to prepare and make sense of these experiences. Absolutely, it is. You needed all.
I'm glad they're doing it with. I'm glad they're doing it with active users. It makes more sense to me.
Oh, absolutely. It's the only way to know for sure. On to Mugglehead magazines. Khiron signs deal with Bogota's largest public health insurance for medical cannabis coverage.
Okay. Khiron Life Sciences Corp has signed a deal with Bogota's largest public health insurance to provide coverage for medical cannabis to patients in Colombia. The Toronto headquartered company with primary operations in Colombia announced the deal days after the country announced mandatory coverage for medical cannabis. Mandatory.
In late December, the company signed a contract with Capital Salad EPS, Colombia's largest insurance company. Under the deal, Zernia, Khiron's medical cannabis clinics will provide medical cannabis services products that Capital can reimburse. Only patients diagnosed with chronic pain, mental health, neurological conditions, and epilepsy will be able to get coverage. Khiron has already started treating patients insured by Capital.
Capital Salad is owned by the city of Bogota, which insures 1.2 million Colombians with an annual budget of $500 million. The agreement by Capital Salad EPS seeks the materialization of Agreement 831 that promoted at the Bogota City Council with the objective of making Bogota the medical cannabis hub of the country, said Bogota City Council Juan Buena.
Last year, Bogota City Council and the mayor's office launched an initiative with the intention of establishing the city as a research, production, and commercialization hub for medical cannabis in Colombia and Latin America. As part of the initiative, Capital Salad signed a contract with Zernia to provide integrative health services and pharmacological treatment using medical cannabis. This past December, the Colombian Minister of Health reaffirmed the inclusion of medical cannabis in the list of mandatory insurance-covered medications as of January this year. On December 30th, Resolution 2808 was signed by the Minister of Health, which integrates the plant along with other government-funded medications.
Over the past 2 years, Zerenia has invested in expanding its clinic operations locations across the city, generating proprietary scientific evidence on the benefits of medical cannabis and delivering superior patient service quality to become the leaders in medical cannabis in Colombia, Latin America, and Europe, Khiron CEO Alvis Torres said. We are thankful for the confidence placed on Capital Salad in Zerenia. With an installed capacity of over 300,000 annual consultations, we are more than prepared to service their patient base, said Torres.
We are convinced that we have created a unique medical cannabis platform that other insurance companies in Colombia and abroad will want to offer to their patients to improve their quality of life. Khiron stock went up with all of this, and that's awesome.
It actually went up.
And we are heading over to my favorite publication. It's my absolute favorite publication, The Fresh Toast. And we're going to take a look at a new study finds alarming trend among older cannabis users.
Many patients do have adverse side effects from cannabis because they often don't view it as seriously as they would a prescription drug. There is an increase in the rate of cannabis-related visits to the emergency department among adults in California, a new study shows. According to the findings published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, Cannabis-related emergency department visits went from a total of 366 in 2005 to 12,167 in 2010.
Research with the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine used trend analysis of data from the Department of Healthcare for access and information. While cannabis is often prescribed to alleviate chronic pain, especially among the elderly, there is also an increased risk of adverse effects on health associated with psychoactive substances, including cannabis.
Many patients assume they aren't going to have adverse side effects from cannabis because they don't view it seriously as they would a prescription drug, said Benjamin Hahn, who is a geriatrician in the Division of Geriatrics, Gerontology, and Palliative Care in the Department of Medicine at UC San Diego School of Medicine. I do see a lot of older adults who are overly confident, saying they know how to handle it, yet as they have gotten older, their bodies are more sensitive and the concentrations are very different from what they might have tried when they were younger.
According to the study, cannabis can slow reaction time and impair attention, which may lead to injuries and falls, increase the risk of psychosis, delirium, and paranoia, exacerbate cardiovascular and pulmonary diseases, and interact with other prescription medicine. Although cannabis may be helpful for some chronic symptoms, it is important to weigh that potential benefit with the risk, including ending up in an emergency department because he got really paranoid.
Education and discussions with older adults about cannabis use should be included in routine medical care, he advised. We have much more to learn about cannabis, given all the new forms of it and combinations of THC, CBD, and CBD, and this will inform our understanding of risk and possible benefits too, researcher said.
Alison Moore, a co-author of the study, said current substance use screening questionnaires typically lump cannabis and marijuana, which are the same thing, with non-legal drugs, such as cocaine and methamphetamine, which can lead to patients being hesitant to answer. Providers can then ask how frequently cannabis is used, for what purpose, for medical, for pain or sleep or anxiety, or recreational to relax, and in what form, smoked, eaten, applied topically, dabbed. And then once the provider has this type of information, they can then educate the patient about potential risks of use, they said. So apparently they think as we get older, I think it's the older generation that lived with reefer madness, and now they're trying it for the first time in like the last 50 years. And it is just stronger cannabis than they're used to, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I think that's where a lot of it is coming from.
Everything in moderation.
Yep. We are sticking with my favorite publication of the French Toast. And we're going to ask a question. Will CBD show up on a drug test?
Here's everything you need to understand about how CBD impact drug tests and what you should do to be on the side. Since hemp was legalized in 2018, increasingly more Americans have been turning to hemp-derived cannabinol to improve their general health and wellness. Recent statistics reveal that 1 in 3 Americans have tried a CBD product, with a majority of users being aged between 18 and 29. However, the close relationship between CBD, which is federally legal, and THC, which is not, poses a challenge to CBD users in the workspace. Will CBD show up on a drug test?
Most workplaces, including major sports leagues, have strict anti-drug policies and subject employees to frequent tests. Failing a drug test can have a dire consequence, such as being put on probation or even losing a job opportunity or career. It is therefore not surprising that many people are concerned about CBD showing up on a drug test. The truth is, it is very unlikely that CBD will show up and cause you to fail a drug test. CBD is chemically different from the psychoactive cannabinoid THC, which is usually screened for in most drug tests. Therefore, having CBD in your system should not be a cause of concern unless the CBD product has some THC in it. That's where the challenge lies. Even negligible amounts of THC can be picked up by some drug tests.
The quality of most of the CBD products in the market leaves much to be desired. Some CBD products are made from cannabis and contain high amounts of THC. While a third-party test should pick this up, some CBD products are not subject to independent testing, while others have product labels that are misleading. It's easy to be deceived into believing that CBD product has zero THC, while actual sense has a significant amount of THC. False positives for the THC may also arise in drug testing. This happens when a test falsely indicates the presence of THC.
How do cannabis drug tests work? Cannabis drug tests use biological samples such as saliva, urine, blood, or hair to test for the presence of THC in the body. The most common test is the 5-panel test that tests for the presence of active metabolites from PCP, cocaine, cannabis, opiates, and I can't even say the word. I can hear it in my brain. Thank you. I couldn't put the beginning in there for the life of me. The 9-panel test screens additional drugs, including barbiturates and benzodiazepines.
Urine is the most frequently used biological sample in drug tests. However, simpler tests that use oral fluids have now become commonplace. They are non-intrusive, easy to use, and give instant results. Most cannabis tests have a cutoff level of 50 nanograms per milliliter. This means that a test will turn out a positive and the THC level exceeds this amount. However, some tests will detect as little as 15 nanograms per milliliter of THC. And what's the difference between drug screening and drug test? The two terms are often used interchangeably, but they actually mean different things. Drug screening involves quick and efficient testing that produce instant results. They confirm the presence of a drug. It's either present in a sample or it is absent. They are also relatively affordable, but may not be as accurate. Therefore, they are mostly used to confirm the presence of a drug, but are usually followed up with a drug test when the screening result is positive.
Drug tests are more accurate than drug screens. They also require a longer waiting time as a sample is sent to the lab for specific testing that gives detailed information. Drug testing is often used to confirm the results from a drug screen. Drug tests screen for the presence of THC, which is the psychoactive compound in cannabis sativa, and not CBD. I don't know why they specifically say cannabis sativa. It's the psychoactive compound found in cannabis. Not CBD, which is non-psychoactive. Therefore, CBD should not show up on a drug test.
Yep. Most CBD products contain little amounts of THC. Legal hemp-derived CBD should not exceed 0.3% THC. However, some drug tests are very sensitive and will pick up trace amounts of THC and hence give a positive result. In such case, it may be necessary to carry a specific drug test that will show the exact amount of THC in one's system. A false positive result is recorded when test picks THC erroneously. Getting a false positive result after consuming a CBD product can be quite scary. However, you need to worry that if that happens to you, if you are sure you haven't consumed any cannabis product, but still turn a positive drug test, it is your right to request a repeat test. Here are a few reasons why you might get a false positive after consuming CBD.
Yeah, consuming a CBD supplement that has high amounts of THC. Certain drugs can give false positive results for cannabis. This includes NSAIDs, and a few other ones. Consuming a CBD product that is contaminated with THC, inhaling secondhand cannabis smoke in an enclosed space. And you can go on to read the rest of the story. We are running out of time, so I unfortunately have to cut this one short. But it seems interesting. I mean, and a lot of full spectrum CBD products will have at minimum 0.3% of THC, which might show up.
Just as an aside, I tested positive for THC after 31 days.
After how many days?
31.
Wow.
I had absolutely no contact with it, no consumption of it for 31 days, and I still tested positive.
And for so it sadly does happen. But that is our PACE News broadcast from the Legacy420.com news desk for today, January 12th, 2022. And as we close the show, we'd like to thank you. Our sponsors, Legacy420.com and the Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. Plus a big thank you to our viewers. Catch our next broadcast with Kelly and Al on Monday. Don't forget to educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate. That's Al's little tagline. Have a great week, folks.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420 enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.